First, we have to define great. So I'll throw out there that great needs to be transformative. It needs to take people someplace they have not been before. It needs to change them and change how they interact with others. So that's where we'll just start there, and that's what great's going to be for the next 40 minutes. I just had an experience. I just held my first Google Daydream. It was like this.
Moment.
It was magical. So despite being deep in the VR, I just never had one, just never done it. It is soft to touches. It is different, at least for me, and not an ad for Google, right? But like different than every other experience I've had with a hardware thing, which felt like a machine, like a piece of equipment. Mm-hmm. Like this feels more like a furniture, like more like clothes, more like something that I already own, and makes me want to share it. And it's great. So in the narrative journey of sort of discovery, experience, which I'm having, right now, I don't have identity yet. I don't identify yet as a daydreamer, but I could, right? And then sharing, it is a very, very good experience. I mean, tell us a little bit about how that came to be. Tell us how this happened. This seems very, very, very specific. And there could have been a lot of naysayers who would have said, no, make it like the other ones or whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a really good point. It is, as some members of the press have described it, it has a high squidgy factor to it. And maybe that's a new metric in VR that we're going to be tracking.
Squidginess. Good. Tattoos were yesterday.
Tattoo was
Squidginess
great. I love
today.
That. I love that. So yeah, the idea of the headset being accessible really kind of permeates the whole content approach as well. I mean, what is great in terms of the content in VR? So a lot of headsets and content can be more hardcore in orientation because you're appealing to people that would have invested in the PCs necessary to run it, or find that kind of industrial design attractive. So at Google, we're thinking of a very large audience. We're thinking of a broad global audience. So a lot of that thinking that we apply in terms of the portfolio for Google Play, in terms of Cardboard itself, which was a source of huge learnings for us, went into designing not only the hardware in terms of accessibility, portability, low friction, but also the games themselves. Okay. So all of those characteristics permeate through.
Well, you got more questions. Sorry. So now I'm sorry, experience this live. So there are no where are the buttons? How do you make it do?
Well,
because it's all soft.
Yes, it's all soft. Basically, you open the front panel. The controller is stored there. Okay. So there's actually a little loop here that stores it for you. Would you hold that for a sec?
Got it. Oh, huh.
So it runs on Pixel phones and a couple of Motorola's and a whole bunch more in the near future. You turn on your phone, use your fingerprint, you turn on the Daydream app, and then it's automatically in VR. You just put it in there.
Oh, and go time.
Yeah.
Oh, and it finds your hands? You can see this.
Oh, no, I can't. I'm waiting for you to hold it.
Okay, there we go.
And then you control this way. Okay. And there's a couple of buttons. So here are the buttons for you that you wanted to see.
Yes. Cool. All right. So I guess what this speaks to. So when I think about great games, because we're in the game room, I'll take a great game moment in my head, and I'm going right after you, Svi, right now. So you guys ever play Metal Gear Solid? Everyone familiar? Okay. Does everyone remember Psycho Mantis? Remember, I can watch as I move the controller with the power of my mind, right? And it was like, what the F? For me, I was like, okay, PlayStation, you got me. Okay, I need vibrating controllers forever. And I think there's going to be specific moments that sort of define communicatable greatness inside of VR. When you try to explain to people who haven't done it yet, oh, no, you got to do it because this is happening. And, I mean, you gave a talk yesterday, Svi, where you were talking about empowering those kinds of moments. So maybe take a deeper dive. How does NVIDIA think about this? This has to happen for people in order for VR to become popular.
Just the sense of presence is so powerful, is so transformative.
Yeah.
But in order to get to this point, there are a couple of things need to happen.
Yeah.
As I said yesterday, it's a function of what you see, what you hear, what you feel, and the environment around you. Yeah. So everything has to look and feel perfect in order not to break presence, right? Breaking presence in a game, that's the worst thing that can happen in VR. It's a moment where you say, okay, this doesn't look right. Okay, you're no longer there.
Yes.
From NVIDIA's perspective, we enable it in multiple ways. One is the hardware. We need to push for a high visual quality. If the visual quality is not that high, if you don't get the fidelity, you're not there to begin with. The second thing is the touch.
Yeah.
You get the presence elements once you interact with the environment. So the best games are the best that allow you to interact with the environment the same way you interact in the real world. And the third one, and I would say it's the most important one, it is also important in non-VR games, but it's especially important in VR, is that the physical environment has to, and your interaction with that environment has to abide to the laws of physics. Okay? Water has to look like water, smoke has to look like smoke, fire has to look like fire, but if something doesn't look or feel right, which happens in non-VR games, like the developers overlook those things because they're not that critical, it will break presence and will pull you out of the experience. So from a game developer standpoint, I think that the challenge is maintaining presence by just keeping all those elements in place.
Sure. And if I could add, and you have to do that with 90 frames per second, which is the constant challenge. Like we have a gunslinger class of pistols in raw data that are unbelievably beautiful. They look really well engineered, and players just are fascinated by just checking out the object.
Yeah.
But we're constantly battling with performance, and so one of the things that we're really always focusing in on. I think to add to what you said, Zvi, is multiplayer. I think is a huge transformative thing in VR games. Whenever we put people into raw data and they're playing multiplayer co-op, this is a thrilling experience for them.
So we should talk about how many of you have done an online, or I guess co-present VR experience? Raise your hand. How many of you have not? And how many of you have not done VR at all? Just checking. Okay, good. So let's.
They won't raise their
It was a
hand.
trick question. So let's talk about co-present, because you're right. The first time you find you're with someone,
Right.
Okay, what have you found to be some of, I guess, the do's and don'ts? So you talked about working with the world physically, right? Does it feel like a wall? Does it look like a wall? Does it act like I expect it to? How about when other people come into play? What are some of the things that you're experiencing that you have to navigate?
Well, collision and stuff like that, the normal stuff. One of the early builds of raw data, I was playing as an archer, and my bow broke, and another player threw me a pistol, and that. Being able to interact at that kind of almost tactical, practical level, it was so thrilling. It's truly cooperative play. And so that's, to me, is what makes that game so good and so enjoyable.
That speaks to kind of back to your first question. Removing layers of abstraction in an experience is really important in VR. So moving away from standardized GUI interfaces, making every interaction you do in that experience feel natural is really important to maintain presence, to make it an impactful experience. So like in the gallery called Starseed, we use a backpack to navigate inventory items. So you reach behind your back, you grab your backpack, and you grab items from your backpack. It makes total sense, right? Finding those kind of conceits for the player, really important to put them in the moment and make them forget that they're in this hardware. And what Google's doing is brilliant because, it's a soft, tactile thing that you want to cuddle with, right? And that's where hardware should move in general, I think. And getting rid of these weird abstractions that we're building, I think that stuff's going to disappear over time. So eventually you'll have a form factor that you don't need controllers because your hands are being tracked naturally. And the headset itself will keep shrinking down. There'll be some kind of retinal projection technology. Eventually all that stuff's going to go away, and that's kind of the magic moment when everybody's like, yeah, VR, well, that's just life, right?
So how are you preparing for that now? So I had a dream back when the Wii U came along, right? That buttons would be dumb, right? And everyone would be the new generation designers. They'd be Wiimotos. They'd be I hate buttons. I don't do buttons, right? Mm-hmm. So you have the same challenge in VR, where you have to raise a new generation of designers who are removing these abstractions.
Yeah.
So I guess sort of year zero, what have you discovered so far? Remember mobile games with virtual joystick, right? What's been the leap that you've made in VR that's get rid of mobile joystick, start swiping? What's sort of the VR equivalent of that?
That's a good question. We just hired a guy, an engineer from Blizzard, 10 years at Blizzard, and now he's doing VR for the first time. And I asked him sort of what's different for you, and he's like, I only had to care about the control of a keyboard and a mouse. Yeah. And all of a sudden now I have to, any possible movement of a player I have to take into account. And so just this instinct that's being developed in our engineers of the kinds of emergent behavior that can happen in room scale, full motion VR, that's what seems to be a game changer for us, this sort of over time understanding what players will or will not do. So it turns out if you have realistic environments, players don't walk through walls because you don't do that in the real world. So a lot of the things you used to have to worry about in games like collision detection, stuff like that, with objects, you don't have to worry about as much. But the game changer for us is sort of like, everyone says it, it's like unpredictability of the player and just really trying to account for everything feeling natural.
Adopting player expectation. When they go into an experience, the more real it is, the more they expect it to behave like reality. So you have to account for all of that. It increases dev time significantly.
Sure, I was going to ask the same question. I imagine, like, back in the day, they'd be at NVIDIA, I need more polygons. Make it push more polygons through the pipe. But maybe they're new questions. Like, what are people asking for when they want the...
You need more polygons, obviously. And, you know, I talked about visual quality. VR requires more than that. Speaking of polygons, like high geometric detail, it's not so much required in non-VR games, but it's definitely required in VR. So you want to, you know, move around the objects, like see the structure of it, just to maintain presence. I just want to add one point to this, you know, the controls and the multiplayer element. Raw Data is one of my favorite games in VR. And
Wait, is everyone familiar with Raw Data? Because it may need a description. Who's played Raw Data? Who has not played Raw Data? There we go. What is Raw Data? That's a real question. What is it?
So Survios, it's Survios' first game. We launched it in early access in July of this year. It's been very, very successful for us. It's a first-person shooter in VR where you have multiple classes of weapons, and you're basically fighting back hordes of robots. And that's the bottom line. It's a futuristic sci-fi game.
But they have figured out the VR grammar, if you will.
Okay.
Like how to develop for VR. Like this is the experience is so realistic. You really feel that you're in this environment, and all the movement, the physics, the interaction is so real. The point that I was trying to make is that, you know, I have a Vive installed in my living room. I bring my friends over and they play the game. So from a multiplayer perspective, there is this element of athleticism that you don't get in a non-VR game. So, you know, they move around, they move their entire body, and once you're in there, you'll find that, you know, when the monsters are approaching you, they don't only move their hands, they start kicking them, even though you have no control here, but you feel that you're in the game. Yeah. So it's a new way to interact in this virtual environment, but once you get this element of presence, you will see that the players, the users, will move their entire body. Like, it doesn't really matter if they hold a couple of controllers. The whole body will move because they're in the environment, so it's a very different thing.
Same thing to you, Jamil. So you have a whole platform experience, and back in the olden time, platform wars like a PlayStation, Xbox, a lot was put into form factor.
Yes.
Obviously, Xbox Live into how do I connect with others, right? Obviously, a lot, you know, cell technology, and we're going to say Spider-Man from the Gran Turismo cars. What are the questions that are being asked of you? Like,
well, I'll just actually back up a little bit on that.
Okay.
I agree with you that the idea of abstracting to some sort of control system has been the model for games for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I think consumers are generally more forgiving if they're abstracting out to a two-dimensional rectangle further out from there. And they understand, okay, to access that, I need to do some kind of a joystick or buttons or keyboard or mouse or something. When you're in that virtual world, everything that abstracts you from it breaks the experience. So we saw a lot of VR experiences that had you playing with a gamepad controller or doing something else that was just not quite a natural action. And so the questions we were asking were, what is the missing half of VR? And the experimentation that we had done with acquiring the guys that made Tilt Brush and then working further with that, we really had a front row seat in terms of how to create a natural human interface for VR. So we ended up with something, we did a lot of prototyping on this and a lot of testing, and we ended up with something that feels very natural. Here check it out.
Ooh.
So, yeah. So it feels like...
it feels like a really light remote control.
There you
like
go.
Super light.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the way it works in the VR environment is like a laser pointer. So you do have the ability to point anywhere you would naturally.
Oh, there's like a point out of here?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Oh, there's little side buttons. If you guys have not had a chance to hold one.
Yeah, there's volume on the actual
Okay.
controller, so you don't have to deal with the phone at all once you've got it in there.
And then just two up top, and then a wheel.
Yes, so it's a click pad that you can also, it's also a touchpad.
Okay.
So you have multiple ways for a game developer to get a lot of complex input into the game, but in a way that's very accessible for grandparents, for people who didn't grow up with playing the video games that we all are so obsessed with.
Sure.
So the accessibility that went into the squidginess of this, that goes into the portfolio, went into the controller as well.
And you can sideways it, like a Nintendo. if you want to.
I don't think we
doesn't do that?
have any examples of that.
Oh, man.
For the time being, it's meant to approximate the handle
What's-
of things that we use in the real world.
What's
anyway.
this thing?
That is a light that tells you.
If it's on or out, power. I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
like if the
questions.
battery's running low and that sort of thing.
I'm sorry, deep dive.
No, that's fine.
Wait, okay, okay, so for me, it's all about me. You have the experience where you go into VR, everyone's had this, where you touch a flame and you feel a little hot for a second, right? Are there other things like that you're making great games, that you're integrating into your VR experiences because you now know them to be true? Everyone knows what I'm talking about,
Yes.
right?
They're only true
I'm not
at
alone.
first, though.
Oh, you lose it?
Yeah,
Lose the flame? Oh, okay.
Your brain kind of builds a subsystem that starts to understand, delineates between the real and the unreal, and combines the two states of being, I think. And over time, so the flame example is a good one because when we were first prototyping the gallery in like early 2013, we had like these flame barrels in this sewer environment and with the big fire roaring in them.
Yeah.
And the first time you do it, you put your hand over it and you swear there's heat coming off the fire, right? But over time, you acclimate to that whole experience, and your brain goes, no, there's no heat there.
Boo. Okay.
So we can't really hinge on many of those things. You can in sort of the first generation, I think, but people are going to adapt to that pretty fast.
We're having lots of fun with Easter eggs. We have an Easter egg in raw data where you can climb up a crane and then basically be posed over a city underneath you. And it's scary as hell. Your heart starts racing. We tap into this, we like to say, this reptilian part of your brain that starts to get triggered. We're firing on all cylinders. So we're figuring out ways to really draw emotion out of people, and it's in multiple ways of doing that.
Well, and that's just, so what are, I guess, the big, for me, like, it used to be like, the VR was like, do a roller coaster, that's the thrill. Or stand on a cliff, right? That feeling of peril was a thrill. I still have the flame thing for now, but that's okay. I guess that's going to go away. What are the future, like, where are the places you are taking people through interaction, through multiplayer, through single player? Where are they going?
Do you remember when you first started playing Guitar Hero?
Yep.
You know, I thought it was going to be like the Wii, where any core gamer picked up the Wii and immediately sat down and just flicked the Wiimote and never did it standing up, right? And I thought with Guitar Hero that was going to happen as well, but it didn't. People stood up. They started acting like rock stars. And I think that's what's happening in these, like, at least in these HTC Vive games like ours, where people start to really behave differently. They start to take on the role of the character in a real way. They become the character. And then all of a sudden they're doing stuff that we didn't even plan for and emerge. And I think that's just such a key thing for us.
Yeah, I should also say that we have areas of elevation changes where it's quite high, and even in design, we catch ourselves all the time. We're designing out like a balcony that's 3 stories off the ground, and I'm going through the scene just testing it, right? And if I'm like a foot away from the ledge and I look behind me and forget where I am, I get this sudden, whoa, shit. So there's certain things that never go away, I think, and speaking to the reptilian brain part of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, figuring out what those things are is tricky. There's not many of them, I don't think, but yeah.
I'm also drawn to the characters in VR.
Okay.
There's, when everything else is 10 times as real, then the characters in the environment have the opportunity to be real, much more real as well. I don't know, have any of you played Gary the Gull on Vive?
Played what?
No, not yet.
Okay, Gary the Gull.
Gary the Gull. Anyone?
It just released on Vive. It's this really extraordinary interaction that you have with this AI cartoon bird, and you find yourself really engaging with it. So in terms of what's coming next, I would imagine that the connection that you have with a real human, like you do in raw data, I would say that is one of the most extraordinary VR experiences that I've had. But to also draw people in, perhaps people that are introverts or shy.
Sure.
You know, if there's an AI that you're interacting with in a meaningful way, you're kind of returning to that experience. Jokingly, we were talking about, what are the words that we can use to attach to greatness in VR.
Yep.
And I would say engagement really is an important one.
Okay.
Because like in raw data, you come back to it because it's a different experience each time, and you're playing with a friend as well.
Yes.
I mean, that is, if you break it down, the origins of games are, board games, or, playing against another person in a friendly way,
Yes.
playing with them. So I think as we restore these kinds of basics of games, and kind of add in things that are uniquely VR because of that extraordinary level of realism and advances in AI. I see a lot happening in that regard.
Well, let's talk a little more about that. So one of our favorite colleagues, Dan Irish, posed me a question. He talked about how games could transform and transplant and transport people from difficult places like hospitals. People who are suffering who don't have a luxury VR conference to go out with unlimited water. What are some of the opportunities that we have to take people better places, to literally make their experience better with games?
One of the things that got me into VR, sorry, I'll just say.
No sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
My nephew had a really bad form of cancer, and he was in the hospital for many years and in isolation. And this is prior to the Oculus and all of that. And I was reaching out to all these different VR companies, asking them, can I get some kind of hardware from you just on loan? He's a young kid. He's like 12. I want to give him some kind of experience to take him out of that isolation hell, right? Yeah. And they're like, no, it's too expensive, $100,000 for a headset, or it's going to wreck his eyes, and all these excuses. But anyways, long story short, the power of VR is essentially that for old folks' homes and for kids in the hospital having treatment. Being able to take them out of that experience is so vital, and I don't think we've even touched on it yet as a community, and we should, and we need to.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research and there's a lot of money that's going into this field. Like if you think about the potential in VR in that sense, sort of taking people to places, you can bring places to people, and you can do it in a 360 video and environment. But I believe that gaming is much more powerful as you start interacting with the content. You feel that you're there.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lot more distracted than 360 video. That's why I believe it's a classic use case for games and gaming in VR. That's what can make it really transformative.
I've done a lot of racing games in my past, but a couple months ago I had the best VR experience. It was a company called CXC down in LA, and coordinating with Project Cars, the great racing game, and basically it was a fully kitted out cockpit of a racing car. Okay. And you were in VR, you had the Oculus on, and it was complete haptic feedback. You're using pedals, everything you would do to race around a real track, and you're racing around a real track, and it was terrifying, scary, heart racing, and I just thought, that's amazing. So simulating, I still believe in simulations, but I also like what Mark Bolas says from the Mixed Reality Lab at USC, where he talks a lot about why can't everything be psychedelic? It should be psychedelic, So, and that's another whole area to go, right? Why we focus
We do that
on
with the Wave. We have that now. We have the joint voyage feature. I'll send you some codes.
There's another piece to this, which is creativity.
Sure.
So obviously, Minecraft and Roblox, Tilt Brush,
yeah.
all of these things exist.
Has everyone tilt brushed? We talk about it because we're like, duh, tilt brush. But raise your hand if you've not tilt brushed. Go tilt brush, because it's transformative once you are empowered that way.
So that seems to us like the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
When you get these kinds of sandbox experiences that are already hugely, immensely popular to normal people around the world, that type of thing also is extraordinarily heightened in the VR environment, where you can build things and see the result of it, look around, have a view of it, perhaps share it. Yes. This is also something that we see as being hugely transformative, and it doesn't have to be exclusively in that model. We had a slew of games launched today. One of them was
congratulations.
Lego. Thank you. Lego Brickheads launched today, which allows you to create a Lego character and build in Lego blocks as well.
All right, I'm going to ask a basic question just so I know. So if I want to play a game, I go get one of those.
Yes.
What, I have to have the Pixel phone or any phone?
Well, you have to have a Daydream-ready phone. So it's a set of hardware requirements and also updates to the Android N operating system.
Okay.
But right now, there's only a few phones. There's the Pixel, the two Pixel phones and two Motorola phones.
Okay.
But you can expect all of our OEM partners, all of our major partners, to be releasing it for their flagship device.
I'm waiting for GDC. I'm hoping you're going to get that Oprah on and be like, blow, you get one. I want to hold out.
That's not a bad idea. I'll
I know,
file
right?
that one away. CES will be a big moment for us as well.
Oh, okay.
So,
Wink,
so
wink, nudge,
stand
nudge.
by for that. But you can also have a high degree of creativity in regular games that people relate to. I mean, or not necessarily, that's not right what I meant to say, but in kind of the traditional format of games.
Got it.
For example, we have a tower defense game that we launched called Underworld Overlord.
Okay.
Let's reverse those words. From Warren Spector.
Oh.
And so that launched today.
Awesome.
And you build your dungeon, and then you then deal with the tower defense style horde that tries to breach your defenses. So there's a level of creativity there that's also really engaging.
All right, we only have 5 minutes. We got to have questions. We're here to serve.
Yeah.
Start with you. Wait, microphone's coming. Wait, here it comes.
Hi, I'm Julie Motz from KWMR. Aside from fear and excitement, what emotions have you been able to reliably deliver through games?
Yeah. I'll just read what aesthetics? What aesthetics define fun?
What emotions?
Yeah.
Emotions.
Emotional aesthetics. Yeah.
It runs the gamut. Honestly, it depends what emotional triggers you're trying to elicit from the player. It's usually based on a serious environment and a character that's trying to drive a narrative. So you can really trigger any emotion. Fear, trepidation. It really depends on the narrative, quite honestly.
There's a lot of empathy happens
Yeah.
in multiplayer. A lot of feeling of being together, the camaraderie. You can imagine the people fighting together.
Yeah, all of the normal cues are there.
Yeah.
That you would expect in real life. Most of them are there, so you trigger all the same kind of inherent reactions.
The sense of mastery that people get is like mastering real-world elements. It completely replaces mastering a controller when you're actually in the world, with a sword and you're doing a good job at it. So it's more than just fear. It's a lot of the stuff that makes you feel like a hero. Mm-hmm. And then there are puzzle games in VR, obviously, that make you feel super smart. I often think that there are hero games and there are puzzle games in VR because that's the demographic who is early adopting in VR. They're either heroes because they got the kid in their living room for the first time, the first kid on the block, or they're tinkerers who like to fit futz with hardware and computers.
Yeah, I know I had total emo about, I don't know what the emotion is, but it was like nostalgia family. So I played this game Snow Fort on Vive where you pick up the snowballs, but I hadn't played that game since I was a kid in real life with my brother, right? We've grown apart, grown up, whatever, and I was playing the same game, like I was making the little fort like I used to make, and I was like, I gotta call my brother, like I'm having some real feelings here. And I think the there-ness of VR, like I really was, back there, and it was sort of a powerful, emotion that wasn't fear or excitement. It was definitely, love and regret.
We've heard a lot from fans of the gallery called the Starseed.
Yeah.
When they got to the end of the experience, they were in awe, and some of them were crying.
Yeah.
And that's stuff we
sure.
didn't anticipate at all.
For sure.
Yeah.
Questions? Oh, where you got it? Are you pointing? I don't know where you're pointing. You got the mic, Pete. Where are you pointing? I see one here. What? Right there. Thank you.
Hi, Dan Toshin from YouGov. So we've been talking about what makes a great VR game, but I'd be really interested to hear what you see as the barriers right now. Is it the platform technology? Is it the kind of the gamer shared vocabulary or grammar of how you interact with it? Is it just that the business case doesn't support the things you want to do? What do you see as standing in your way right now of the things you want to do?
Start with the game developer.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Make you greater. What would make you greater?
We're just continually working with optimization. That's like our chief focus right now. And it's amazing. Like everything counts. Like sound designers are the happiest people now. VR makes sound design such a joy. So for example, we've got a shotgun in VR. Normally you would just have a shooting sound or whatever, but we have, obviously the sound of cocking the shotgun, the shooting of it, and then the shell being emitted. But you have to have 3 different locations on the gun for those sounds to emit from. And that kind of level of realism that we're starting to put into these games really, really lead to intense immersion, And so I just feel like this constantly pushing the boundaries of making sure that no one's ever pulled out of the reality of the world is kind of a good focus right now.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's all about reiterating on content. The platforms are there. There are millions of PCs out there that are ready. HTC, Vive, Oculus are great high-end platforms. There are many other headsets. But figuring out the VR language, VR grammar takes a lot of time and effort. So as for the install base and the effort that developers will have to put in, I would say that developers face a couple of choices now. The install base is very small. So one option is to aim for the lowest common denominator and try to make money on VR, which is hard, especially in the next couple of years or so. And the other thing that they can do is what Survios is doing and many other developers is just to aim as high as possible. Try to get a sense of presence with the highest visual quality, fidelity, and all the VR elements in place. Build a name for yourself and position yourself well for when VR really takes off. So even if given that the install base is so small, that's the right thing to do. And these are the developers that NVIDIA is eager to work with. I don't think that the hardware, I don't think that the platform, I believe that all the building blocks are here. There is a lot to improve, there is a lot to do, and so many aspects, but it just takes time to reiterate on content and get it right.
Fragmentation is a huge issue. I want prices to come down. We need competition. I think what Valve is doing with Lighthouse and free licensing of that technology is brilliant, because guess what's going to happen in the next 2 years? You're going to have a number of different headsets using a common shared technology, a common infrastructure. And once prices come down on PCs that are capable of playing these things, and NVIDIA is doing great work bringing down min-spec, once all those things start rolling, that's when there's going to be a massive tipping point, I think. Yeah.
Cool. Any more questions?
Hey, great panel. I'm sorry, great panel, Apurva Capital One. Super quick question. And this is based on the amount of work it takes to create great experiences with a very small market, especially in these early days. Do you see a different monetization model developing for, especially for the developers?
Ooh, different monetization models, hard one. She's like a leading question.
Yeah,
it's all you.
I can kick that off.
All the money.
I think that was a two-parter. You said, how long does it take to develop a game? Was that the first?
I've done some VR dev myself, obviously a lot of work.
Yes. Yes.
But it's a very small part.
Yes. So my context for the answer is that I manage the outreach and curation of the Daydream Games portfolio. So I've been talking to developers. We started about a year ago, really, having in-depth conversations. So for the titles launching now, they've had 11 months to develop. I think I saw Bob Rafi in the audience somewhere. He might have stepped out. But we had a conversation in February, and then his game, The Arc Slinger, launched last week. Some developers have been have managed to get an amazing experience out in a shorter period of time, but it's really about how many resources you can put onto the project, how much time you have with the actual hardware, which we were admittedly a bit slow getting production devices out to partners. So, and we have games that are still in development that we signed a long time ago. So that part varies. In terms of business models, since the install base for the phones that can actually run Daydream is relatively low, we've been advising developers that are more comfortable with designs that favor premium or paid games to kind of focus on that. It really kind of depends on what for the game that you want to make, what the design naturally leads itself to. So most of them are paid. Many of them are try before you buy, and we have a couple of games that are actually free to play, like in-app purchase based. Like NetEase has a game on our platform at launch. So it varies. And we expect the number of in-app purchase games to increase once we're at critical mass.
All right. Well, then let's wrap this up. So here's what I'm going to challenge you guys with. So besides your own fantastic games, the gallery, right? Give everyone raw data. One game that they must have. One game that right now you think would be a great experience for them. Any platform, open-minded. Could be Daydream.
Water Bears.
Which one?
Water Bears. Bears.
Water Bears. Water Bears?
Water Bears.
Where would one find Water Bears?
For the Vive.
For the Vive. Water Bears? Got it. I'm going to get that.
Tilt Brush. For those of you who haven't tried Tilt Brush, just go ahead and try it. I don't think that it took the developers a month to develop this game. It's relatively simple. Transformative is something that can only be done in VR.
Gnomes and Goblins, I think just because it shows a future potential narrative path, that it really sucks you into the experience and you feel like you're in this magical forest with gnomes, which is amazing. And the way that they interact with you is pretty compelling.
Can I say two?
Absolutely. You know what? Why not? Give them their money's worth. You get a second one too. I got you. I see you.
So I love Audio Shield on Vive.
Oh my God! I started playing that yesterday. Yeah.
Isn't it incredible? You're just basically bouncing these projectiles that are coming at you to music.
Yes.
So it's incredibly engaging.
And the second wonder moment inside Audio Shield, wherever you are, if you're out here, amazing, is when you go to the internet and you find out you can get more songs.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, I can get my favorite song and play this game.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was also really startled, going back to the conversation about character, with London Heist. I think it was mentioned on stage yesterday. It's almost like a mini game within a suite of things for PlayStation VR.
Yes.
But it's really extraordinary being interrogated by this thug, and you're sitting there, and you're like, holy crap, I can't believe this is happening. It's really cool.
Yes.
And there's one more game that I encourage you all to try is the NVIDIA Funhouse.
Yes.
It is available on Vive.
It's a masterclass of physics.
Exactly. So we work with developers, but in the case of Funhouse, we really wanted to pave the way and to show the world what's possible in VR. So basically aim for the highest level of visual quality, fidelity, interaction. It's a new way for storytelling in VR gaming. It's available for free on Vive, as well as on Oculus Rift. It's one of the most popular games out there, and I encourage you all to try it out.
Yeah. And I was going to say, for me, like, it's not a game. Google Earth. If you guys have not done Google Earth yet, BT dubs.
That's pretty incredible. Yeah.
It's free. It's ridiculous. You're going to go to like your mom's house. You're going to go to like a school. You're going to go to the Grand Canyon. Ridiculously well executed. Like if there are games that are like were Google Earthy, I'd be like, do that all day. I also show people, what's it called? Accounting. Because it's a different type of VR experience, and especially like younger people, they think it's super funny, so they're like, ah ha ha ha, ha all this misfortune. But it's like a different type of interaction than most of the ones that I've had that I like to show people.
The lab is also a good showcase.
The lab. Sorry, better. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Delete the lab. People love that bow and arrow.
Yeah.
Oh, so like that is really something that people come alive with
Just
as well.
touches on a bunch of stuff that people should experience.
Yeah, great idea by them.
Yeah.
And I guess, are they still adding to it? Is it still going? Is
Yeah,
lab
there's still
alive?
rating and there's secrets and it's Valve.
Okay, yeah, that too. Yeah, the lab. All right, so we're done. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Thank all of you very much. And they're going to be around. Ask more questions.